Hi, Scott Sager here, Vice President for Church Relations here at Lipscomb. I'm excited to welcome my friend Rick Rusaw. He's with us today. He is with the Spire Network, and he is also on the executive team with Glue. And Rick, I want to welcome you and tell you how glad we are to have you in Nashville.
Great. Always love being here. I love Lipscomb, what you guys are doing, and Nashville's always a great spot to be in. So
Well, we're very delighted to have you, and it's been a challenging year all over the country, and you've probably seen a lot of that.
it's been crazy.
It's been challenging for us here, but we've been very excited about the way we've seen resiliency and a lot of good things happening around here. But we wanted to bring you in to talk to ministers and to church leaders specifically about some of the challenges that we face as we kind of look towards the future. And I've got hope. How are you?
Yeah, I think we're in this time. I've been saying to pastors when there's sustained stress and extended ambiguity, that's a cocktail for burnout for us, right? And we've been in this whole long stretch, and it kind of depends on where you are in the country. What I'm finding is the more blue your state is, the more restrictive things have been. Maybe the more urban or rural, kind of depending on how we've dealt with stuff. Ethnicity has a matter around, but the reality is we've all been in the same storm. We're not all in the same boat, but
Right.
it has been stressful, and I think pastors around the country have just carried this long, heavy arc of leadership that's been pretty challenging.
I've been seeing that specifically here in the Southeast and know that there's a lot of people that are going to be excited to hear kind of some of what you're doing and how your resources can help to bless churches. So tell everybody a little bit about Glue and your association with Glue.
Sure.
Then we'll back up and kind of get into your story a little
Sure,
bit.
glad to do that.
Okay.
So glue is
It's spelled GLOO.
OO. So yep. And what we're really trying to do is bring big tech and big data to make available to churches. Right. It's Scott Beck, who founded Glue, is the guy who did Blockbuster Video and Einstein Bagels and Ancestry.com and Pacific Dental Services. So he knows how to scale things from kind of one to a thousand. And what he wanted to do was how do we kind of knit together the global Christian ecosystem? Churches in a city, for example, here in Nashville, I would have no idea how many churches, 700, 800, 1,000. And they do all this good work. They have this opportunity for influence, and yet we never really leverage up the power of the collective church in a community. And so Glue's just trying to provide infrastructure. If you think about it, in your neighborhood, you've got the water lines and the sewer lines and the electric lines, and you couldn't have afforded to bring those utilities in, but you use them. And that's really what Glue's trying to do, is to provide substructure utility to allow churches to access things like big data. How do we understand better the people around us? How do we build lookalike audiences? Those kinds of things. And also, how do we bring that collective cumulative data together? And then on top of that, how do we share resources? So Barna, we partner with Barna, and Stadia, Spire's a partner with them. A lot of resources available for churches on the Glue platform.
So before you were associated with Glue, maybe we should just back up. Tell me about you. Tell me, where are you from?
Sure.
How'd you get to Colorado, which I think is where you live now? So.
Right. Yeah, upstate New York. Came to Christ in high school. First Christian in my family in several generations. I tell everybody we can never do family reunions because we can't get parole dates to line up, And grace changed our lives, changed my life, changed my family's life, and started preaching a year after I became a Christian.
Wow.
The pastor in our church, our little church in upstate New York, Syracuse, moved to another church somewhere in Pennsylvania, and we were without a pastor, right? They were all support. They needed support to get there, people to help fund them. And so I had spoken for a youth group thing, and one of the elders came to me and said, "Hey, would you speak for us in a couple of Sundays?" So I did. And my senior year of high school, I was preaching 3 out of 4 weekends a month, and I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, honestly, I was terrible. There was a lady in the church. Her name was Aunt Roxy. I'm not sure whose aunt she was.
Wow.
Her husband had been a pastor, and he'd passed away. She was in her 80s, and she would help me write sermons. And I always knew if they weren't so good, because on the way out the door, she'd say, "Well, Rick, at least I could hear you this morning. So I knew it wasn't such a good job at that
Wow,
point. But,
that's great. So Aunt Roxy,
Aunt Roxy.
she's your first resource for preaching, huh?
Yeah, helped write sermons. And all of us have those people in our
Absolutely.
lives, right? That have journeyed with us and helped
Yeah.
us. And it wasn't on my list of, hey, I want to be a pastor, but actually, that's where God called me, and it's where I landed, and ended up at Cincinnati Bible College, and then I was in Fort Myers for a few years. Worked with Christ in Youth. You guys know them well.
Sure.
And,
Great.
And then in '91, went out to Longmont, Colorado, to be a pastor of a church. 6 weeks after I got there, that church celebrated its 100th anniversary. So it was a long time established.
So when
church.
was it established?
1891.
Wow, same year that Lipscomb was established.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. There you go.
Wow.
Made for the code on our door, 1891, which is simple. So.
Okay. Yeah, and so you came into an established church.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me what that's like to be a young minister coming into an established church and trying to figure out how to navigate some of the challenges, right?
Yeah, I was 31 when I went. It was the first place I'd been the lead pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Church was several hundred, great history, but in a real spot of needing kind of a new vision, new chance. And so, I did a couple things early on, which was simply try to embrace the people from where they were, talk about what are we doing to reach our community. We started opening up things around children's ministry and recovery things, and started seeing some growth. And along the way, I learned, got to help the people who have built this feel like they're a part. And so I started engaging some of the seniors in our church and inviting them in to discussions. We ended up calling it the Gray Hair Group. Met for 23 years, actually.
I want to hear a little bit more about this, because this sounds like a key strategy for initiating change in a church is to lead in the way you did.
Yeah, we don't do change well, right?
Okay.
Most of us don't like change. We don't change until the pain of staying like we are is greater than the pain that comes with change.
Mm-hmm.
And people aren't going to change. There's a great line, you probably used it, we don't change when we see the light. We change when we feel the heat. And so they had felt the heat of, hey, our church is not growing. We're losing people to other places. But also, the people who help build something, I've always been, I think we ought to figure out why we're making this change and how are we engaging the influencers. I got asked in an interview a while back, what I thought my leadership strength was, and I said, I'm not really sure I have one, other than I try not to take too many punches. I want to keep my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times when we're young and we're jumping in, we implement change, but we're not thinking about the people who maybe implemented some of those things, put them there. And so we just simply brought people along. We changed the name of the church, we changed location, we changed worship styles, we changed how we were approaching the community. And what I found was, if people were a part of understanding and actually even having dialogue around that, then they were the ones actually championing the change. And it wasn't just me doing that.
So you would basically, in your gray hair group, say, I wonder about changing the name of the church. And this conversation might go on for like how long?
We were probably on that one. It probably was several months,
Okay.
maybe 4 or 5 months. And what we, I can't think of anything that they really caused us to go, oh, well, we're not doing that.
Okay.
It was more shaping how we said it. I found that there were certain ways I'd say something and they'd like bristle if I changed that language, then they didn't. And so that helped me when I was dealing with the congregation as a whole. They had a chance to be, people want to be heard. They want to be listened to, and they want to feel like they're a part. And sometimes as leaders, we don't always engage that process, but it was always worth it to bring people along on that.
Saved you a lot of time in the long run.
And a lot of grief later. Yeah.
And think of the relationships, too. I bet some of your favorite people ended up being in
Plus, I remember some of the people that I had the most difficult time with when I first showed up were people who actually later on were real advocates for the church. People vote with their feet at church. And so sometimes when we're wondering why somebody disappeared, it's possible that we didn't engage them along the way. Now, ministry is great because of people, and ministry is a pain because of people, and all of us get
That's
that.
tough. So one of the things that you were able to do at your church was to really be known as an externally focused church.
Sure.
So you ended up writing a book about that. So tell us a little bit about kind of what was behind that, how did it kind of unfold, and then about the book and the impact it's had.
Sure. My friend Eric Swanson, a lot of you know Eric, he's at Leadership Network, and Eric's just a great thinker, and he's out in our area, and we just started connecting. He was seeing the stuff we were doing, so we had decided that the church backed up out of the stream in the last 50 years. It's going by the front door. We didn't like what was happening, so we started our own schools, we started our own clubs, we started our own organizations. And we just decided we were going to get in the stream going by. So we got plugged into public schools. We got plugged into some of the things going on in social services. We got involved in things with single moms, foster care, adoption, mentoring kids. And because, maybe it's the New Yorker in me, I just wanted the church to not just be a place where we gathered, but that we scattered well and we engaged the real issues in our city. And so we were kind of doing missional before it was cool,
Okay,
I guess.
that's
And
great.
we didn't even know what to call it, so we called it externally focused. And Eric was seeing things happening with some churches, and so we wrote the book, and we tell everybody it was the second best-selling Christian book that year. It was released right behind Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life. So I tell Rick all the time, we got buried under his book, but it's really been a book that I think did help encourage a lot of churches.
Well, you can tell people that between your book and Rick Warren's book, it sold 31 million copies that year, right?
I absolutely did, exactly.
That's it. It's like playing on the same basketball team with Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
That's great. So, externally focused church, how would you tell young ministers today to think in those terms, given what's happening with COVID and the challenges that we're facing? What does it look like, or what do you think it's going to look like to be at least thinking about externally focused church?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Scott. I think the reality is this disruptive pandemic, right? And it's not just the pandemic. It's been the pandemic. It's been the racial challenges we've had. It's been the political environment that we've been enduring, and I think there's this opportunity in this disruption to think differently about what we're doing. Now, what we were doing in the mid '90s that was innovative would be old news today.
Right.
But the challenge is, how are we engaging our communities? People are looking for hope, and they're looking for grace, and they want stuff for their family, and they're trying to figure out their life. And this year's really disrupted a lot of things, so people are hungry and looking. Unfortunately, they're not looking to the church for those answers, but the church that engages. One of the things that I found was service, good deeds brought goodwill, and out of that goodwill, you got to kind of share good news, right? And it was a relational
Say that again,
piece.
I like that.
Yeah, so good deeds create goodwill, and with goodwill, you can share good news.
That's great.
Let's say that you said to me today, hey, that shirt you're wearing, I don't think it's a great color. I don't think it works for you. Here's the deal. We've gotten to know each other well enough that I'm actually going to listen to you. I'm going to pay attention. I might argue with you. I might challenge your own fashion sense. I might debate this. It might hurt my feelings. But you've earned the right to speak into my life. Right. But let's suppose we didn't know each other, and you said, hey, that shirt you're wearing, I don't really like it. Here's what would happen. Later tonight, when I talk to Diane, she'll ask me how my day was. And say, oh, it was great. And I met one guy, some jerk that didn't like my shirt. Because you haven't earned the right to speak in.
Gotcha. And
I think service in the city, looking at our city for where it is and where there are real needs and real issues and opportunities for us to engage, if we're serving and we don't care who gets the credit and we're just coming alongside what's already happening, we earn the right to be heard. And I watched our church in Boulder County, one of the most, for several years running, we get voted the most liberal county in America. Anti-church. We call them ABC people, anything but church. We're good with anything but church. And yet our church got invited to be in the public school settings. And if there's an issue going on in our city, we get a seat at the table to talk about those things. But it came over time. We raked a lot of leaves, before any of that happened.
So how long were you there?
Yeah, boy, a long time, 28 years.
28 years. So 28 years, how did you decide it was time to transition to Glue?
Sure. So it wasn't really a transition to glue for me. It was when I was 55, I went to our elders and said, "Hey, I've got lots of energy. I don't plan on really retiring from working, but I do think that when before I turned 60, that it would be healthy for the church if I stepped back." Because I watched a lot of people stay too long, and maybe lose some of the energy toward innovation or toward driving to a new challenge, or we keep repeating the things we know how to do really well.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to be in that camp. And so, so when I was 55, we started talking about what that looked like, and then didn't quite make it. I was actually 60 when I stepped back as the lead, and then ended up helping with Spire, building this network for pastors.
Tell us about Spire then.
Yeah, Spire really is an effort that came out of my tribe, Independent Christian Churches, the North American Christian Convention, which has been a great event, great connectivity. Was losing energy and steam, and like every conference that's 70 years old, it needed to rethink what it was doing, and so we wanted to help build a platform for pastors, for leaders. I think the challenges for ministry are incredible. We see more people dropping out of ministry and less people going into ministry. All the stats about pastors aren't the greatest stats. And so we wanted to bring connection and great content and collaboration and build a network for pastors of encouragement and opportunity for them to share their ideas, and really to make it more of a more crowdsourced, if we could think that. So that young guy who's got a great idea, like, how do we help that surface up and for people to see it and hear it?
So Spire is the Independent Christian Church's kind of relaunch of the North American Christian Convention.
Partly that. Yep, we do have a conference. In fact, doing one here in Nashville in September. It'll be the third one. First one went really well in Orlando. Last year we were headed toward 2,000 to 3,000, and of course with COVID we went online and had really good response. This year we'll be in Nashville, and looking forward to that. But the conference is only one part. We want to provide a digital platform that people can connect in. We want to provide some online events. We have huddles that we're doing, like a weekly Spirecast. We're getting ready to start a thing where if you have an idea, similar to maybe Reddit or something, you can actually post, well, here's what we did about those things, and just let people really kind of fill content in.
So it's a whole learning community for people.
Yeah, and a place for pastors to connect up in a healthy environment and find out what's going on from others. So.
Well, if you were going to be talking to a minister who, you knew when it was time to do something else, you could just kind of sense that God was leading it. How do you talk to somebody today who's just feeling overwhelmed, is feeling like maybe the bucket's empty?
Yeah.
How would you talk to them about how do you make a decision about, I've always said it's dangerous to be running from something instead of being called to something.
I think you're spot on with that.
So talk to us about how do you sense that, and what advice would you give somebody really in this ambiguous time about making life decisions and all that kind of thing?
I think there's a couple of things around that. I think the first is, as you've said, are we running from something? If we are, we ought to ask why. Are we tired? Are we hurt? Is there some challenge we don't want to address? Either with our team or in the church itself or in our own family or whatever that might be. So, are we running from? I think secondly, we probably should listen to some other voices in our lives, the people around us. What do they see? What do they think? And I'm not talking about the people who will just be really nice and say, "Oh no, we want you to stay forever," right?
Sure.
I was just glad on the day I announced my retirement that nobody stood up and applauded. I was grateful for that. But I heard a great line from Dave Dummett at the Spire conference this year. He said, "Hey, this has been an exhausting year for us, right? Because this was in September." And he said, "If you're tired from ministry, you're probably doing the right stuff. If you're tired of ministry, you probably ought to rethink what you're doing." And I think there's some real wisdom and insight in that.
Okay. So let's say that I'm trying to decide which one that is, you know, and it's
Yep.
and it a little bit like a scale. Some things I'm tired from, and some things I'm tired of, and
Hmm.
just kind of how would you counsel somebody to kind of
Sure.
uh,
I think it always starts with, hey, pull away for a day or two. Get some time with God. Just
hmm,
because as pastors, we're terrible about soul care stuff,
right,
right? So where are we with that? What's God speaking into our lives around that? And I've never been one of those guys that has had sat on a rock and waited for God to write something in the sky for me. But we all know
right,
when God's pulling or tugging on us. I think talk to the people who are closest to you. There's somebody on your team, whether it's a volunteer or a staff member, who knows you really well.
hmm,
Talk to some people away from there. Some mentor you've had in your life, maybe friend, in
hmm,
another part of the country. Bounce that around. If you're married, clearly, what's your spouse thinking
hmm,
about that? And I think it's really what really what's best for the church
hmm,
and what's best for me. I don't think it's a bad thing to have some kind of personal self interest in all of this, right? It's
right,
like we're all motivated by our self interest.
sure,
And hey, what is it that am I invigorated by this, or when I think about what I'm doing, um, do I catch myself feeling like, oh man, I'm pulling a sled up a hill?
hmm, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I think that what you've said, and then I'd probably just say give yourself 30 days or
Oh, sure, yeah,
some number,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I was 5 years ahead of when I thought
Okay.
so it wasn't like I was in a
Right.
spot of, I just was looking ahead and saying to our elders, I think for the health of our church,
Mm-hmm.
I'll have been there, 28 years. That seems like a long time.
Sure.
I want to make sure I'm staying fresh, and I also think that would be a good transition point. So I just personally had targeted that.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that was the right or wrong thing to do, I suppose up for debate. But
No, I think it sounds
yeah,
super wise to
yeah.
me, and it's always great if you can feel like you're leaving with the cupboard full and with a lot of resources and high energy, all the things that you did. I think.
The truth is, in ministry, we
Mhm.
just don't transition well.
Right.
Churches have struggle with transitions.
Yeah.
There's very few. I'm sure we could do some things better on ours. I love Matt, who's now leading in our place, and
Mm-hmm.
he's doing a good job. And I still get to be around and be a part. I preached Life Bridge a couple weekends
That's
ago,
great.
and I think we could all lead better.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So let's transition one more place before we wrap this up. Not only are ministers feeling a lot of anxiety,
Mm.
but communities are, right? And so not only is Glue a resource that can help churches, but tell me a little bit about this Churches Care initiative and
Yep.
the 5 things that you're helping kind of flesh out for communities.
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to do with Churches Care is come into a city. We want to help scholarship churches to get on the Glue Connect platform. And we want to help run a cooperative ad campaign. So it'd be targeted social media, direct targeting, with things around stuff people are looking for, stuff around relationships or vocation or finances or health or emotional. Those are the 5 areas of flourishing from Tyler Vanderweel out of Harvard, who was a Christian
Okay.
and did this global study. And we want to help bring some assessment tools to that, do a state of the city with Barna. What does your city really look like? What are the demographics? Not just the demographics, but the psychographics. What are the needs? What are the most searched words people in your community are looking for? What are the most, even from a biblical standpoint, what are the most popular Bible verses people are looking for? What are those things that are going on? And remember those Got Milk campaigns,
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
Where's the Beef, or any of those
Uh-huh.
that were these collective ad campaigns? What we want to do is do a collective campaign in a city about Churches Care, and we want to get hundreds of churches on the platform that share their resources, what they've got around those issues,
Mm-hmm.
and then help match them up to people who are looking for things in the city. So we're not targeting people who are already in the church. We're trying to target people
That's great.
in the city who don't realize that churches actually care about these issues too.
That's great.
So.
Now, how would people find out about glue? How would you tell them to start?
Yeah, so you could go to glue.com, glue.us. We'll get you there as well. And we are trying to provide really those infrastructure resources that I'm a pastor, I'm a practitioner, but data really moves things. Like if I said to you, when I woke up this morning, it was 40 degrees in my house. You might say to me, you better get some heat in the house.
Right.
And I said, well, actually, it wasn't 40 degrees Fahrenheit. It was 40 Celsius. It was 104 in my house. You'd probably say, maybe you should get some air conditioning going, right?
Right.
If I said, well, it actually wasn't the temperature in my house. Somebody in my house had a temperature of 104. You would say, you better check for COVID, or maybe you got the flu. You better watch. And if I said, well, actually, it was my 6-month-old grandson, Braden, who had 104 temperature, you're probably calling 911 on my behalf.
Right.
And all that moved was you got data that helped you make a better decision. Because data can be interesting, like, oh, I didn't know that, or it can be actionable.
Okay.
And it's how do we make data actionable for us? And that's what we want to help churches move towards and be able to respond. We only have so many resources in the life of church. And if we can be better stewards with what we're spending our time on, I think it's a good thing.
That sounds exciting. If you were just going to kind of close this down by saying, here are my main takeaways I want to leave with church leaders and ministers, what is it that you'd...
Yeah, so first of all, I love pastors. I think the job you have is one of the most challenging jobs out there. And people don't get it, and it's confusing, and now we've added to that this long period of uncertainty, right? And so, my hope for us is that we can lean into what's coming and not simply try to recapture what we had, because the world is different. And I think on top of that, take care of your own heart. I hope you're doing that. It's hard. People have no idea the chipping away that goes on for you as a pastor all week long.
Right.
And then I think it's embrace the opportunities. It's been challenging, but with every challenge are opportunities. And opportunities are windows to something I think God's up to.
Yeah.
And so what is it you're leaning into? And then the city has never been riper. Your community's never been riper for the church to show up and engage and connect.
Exactly right.
And we have a great opportunity to do that.
I did my niece's wedding a few months ago and read Jeremiah 29. But just tried to remind her, you're getting married in a significant year, and God's going to use your marriage to be a blessing, right? And I told her, and I told anybody who will listen, this has been the hardest year, but it's also been the most rewarding and significant year, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm really excited about what you're doing, helping churches. Welcome to Lipscomb.
Yeah, great.
Hope we'll
to be
get
here.
you back a lot.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
Anyway, look forward to the Spire conference. I believe it's September 14 to 16.
It is.
At
Here
the
in
Gaylord?
Nashville at the Gaylord. Yep.
Okay.
And I hope you join us.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.